So, webinar agenda today, guys. This webinar takes a practical look at the deployment and the processes involved in deploying the 3CX software-based PBX platform. I'm not going to go through everything on that screen now as I discuss the agenda, but they're all the topics that I'm going to touch on over the next half hour, 45 minutes. Some of the parts that are really worth the price of admission is we're going to touch on the TCP UDP port requirements and some of the network implications that you need to think about when deploying 3CX, and we'll talk in a bit of detail about going through the setup wizard and the configuration console. So, 3CX system overview. As you all know, it's a SIP standard-based software PBX. It runs in a Windows and Windows environments only. It does not run as a Unix on a Unix platform. It does not run on a Mac platform. It runs on Windows platforms and Windows only. It is the largest, most successful Windows-based platform available in the market today. Because it's a SIP open-based standard, it works with all major SIP phones, VoIP gateways, VoIP providers, no need for proprietary hardware. Whatever Windows servers you have available, you can deploy on. Whatever phone you want to choose, you can use. There are supported phones, there are supported gateways, there are supported VoIP providers, but you're not restricted to using those, so feel free to use unsupported. From the supported side of things, both SNOM and Yealink that we deal with here are supported phones for the 3CX platform. You should all probably be aware, but if you're not, the licensing is based on concurrent calls. So the entry-level license for this is 4 concurrent calls. So that means if we've got a call going outside to an external customer, that's 1 concurrent call. If we've got 2 people talking to each other internally, that would be a total, and somebody talking outside, that would be 3 concurrent calls. So each handset in use internally counts as towards that concurrent call count. There's lots of expansion licenses available to expand the capability of the system. So first of all, to increase the number of concurrent call counts. So we start off with 4 or 8 or 16 or whatever number we start with. If we need to upgrade that to increase the capacity of our system, it's as easy as applying for a new license, receiving a new license key, and applying that license key to our existing system. No reinstalls, no major impacts, no hardware changes. Potentially hardware changes if you're running something really close to the limit of the capability. More than likely, though, no hardware changes, and away we go. So nice and easy. There's a sophisticated call center capability available on this platform as well. Most call center, external third-party call center apps cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. 3CX, nothing like that, and very sophisticated, and will address probably 95% of the market's requirements, so without having to go to something third-party. Multi-tenant licenses are available for those who are looking at service provider capabilities or being an ITSP in their own right, and hotel service licenses, which are very powerful license combinations for people selling into that hotel market space. So they'll integrate into property management platforms or standalone services as well. So lots of good stuff there, and additional licensing options. And virtualization support. I don't know how many are aware that 3CX will run in VMware environments, giving us lots of flexibility in where we physically run them, redundancy and recovery and all those sort of things. So it's a very flexible and standards-based platform. A couple of things that we know and love about 3CX, web-based management. We all like that because that lets us manage our product, whether we're in the office, working from home, out mobile in Starbucks or somewhere. We have that ability to get to the management console and see what's going on in our customer environments. Auto provisioning of supported phones. So again, 3CX makes a distinction between supported products and unsupported products. It'll work with unsupported products, but if you need to place a call and get help from 3CX help desk, it'll need to be a supported product, and also supported products do get some benefits like auto provisioning and those sort of things, so it does make a bit of a difference. Scalability of this product is sensational. We can go from the entry-level license with 4 concurrent calls all the way up to our 1,000 concurrent calls. We can scale past that in a single site, but it takes a little bit of mucking around to make that work. But also multi-site, there's some really nice tight integration in multi-site environments, multi-site presence, etc., etc. So, as I said, 3CX is a seriously feature-rich corporate level, enterprise level PBX, and as I say, runs in a Windows environment with those familiar Windows looking configuration screens and things. With virtualization and backup to disk and all the recovery options, it is one of the most easy to back up and manage and easy to recover in the case of hardware failure PBX systems that you'll ever have to deal with. And we'll see some evidence of that as we go through the installation process so you understand what's involved. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the multi-site presence. This is something that even some of the larger PBX vendors have struggled to do well. 3CX does it extremely well. And all the usual things we'd expect, like voicemail to email and the ability to take a roving call on your mobile, but if you want to ignore it, you can send it back to your corporate email rather than having it land on your mobile phone email, etc., voicemail. So lots and lots of options with how we deal with calls, both in the office and out of the office. Another thing that they do really well is remote extensions and mobility. So remote extensions, they offer some proprietary protocols to support native SIP protocols for high availability, highly reliable remote extensions and easy deployment of remote extensions. They also have the mobile clients for iPhone and Android, and they're very, very sophisticated and very easy to run an extension with full functionality on a smartphone out of the office and anywhere you're traveling. So as I said, very, very solid integration of these sort of functionalities. Find me, follow me capabilities, as you'd expect. So forward calls to mobiles when you're out of the office, and you can do that based on office hours, caller ID, all sorts of different features and filters we have in there, and as I say, sophisticated management of a call path. As I mentioned, the call center features, just some of the stuff available in this 3CX system includes a real-time agent and queue status and statistics. You know, that's pretty mandatory. Includes wallboard capabilities, so we can put it up on a big screen and see what's going on in a call center or a sales team or a tech support team or whatever else, and just see what is actually happening with all that call traffic, including stats about hang-ups and rejects and queue wait times, etc., etc. Lots of advanced queuing strategies, so whether we do it on least used or next available, or lots of different ways to route our calls through a sales or incoming call management team. Very detailed reporting, customizable reporting, so callback functionality, and of course listen and whisper and barge in features are all available. Now, all this agent management is all done from a central point, as you'd expect, and centrally managed and configured in terms of what functionality agents have, what reporting is available to particular agents, etc., etc. So as I said, very sophisticated call center management functionality within 3CX. It is an optional extra license, but certainly equal to a lot of the more expensive solutions out in the marketplace. And this feature by itself drives a hell of a lot of sales for us and 3CX. So let's get on to the deployment, guys. This is the guts of what we're here for. And I think I'll get through this relatively quickly because it is a pretty straightforward function. I pulled the 3CX software off their website the very first time and ran through it without any help from the tech team, without any previous instructions or exposure to the system, and had it up and running in probably 25 minutes. So once you've seen this presentation, you'll have it done a lot faster than that. So what we're going to talk about is making sure that you're registered to get access to all of this software and things, what operating systems we can run it on, and that's what's Windows operating systems, obviously, where to get the software, what to do about license keys, ports and things we need to worry about. Then we're going to go through the wizard and a quick look at the web console and chat about gateways, and then we'll be done for the morning. So reseller registration. Two pieces of this that we need to do, guys. So at 3CX, if you're not already a partner, or if you are, partner registration, follow the link in this slide. Go in, answer all the questions. It's not very complicated. You'll have all the information at your fingertips. Should take you about 2 or 3 minutes maximum. And when you get to the bottom of that screen where you do the registration, there's a comments field. And in there, if you want to do business with 3CX and Alloy CP, just type Alloy CP in that comments field, and they'll make sure that any inquiries you make and things are sent via us. If you don't want to do business with Alloy CP, put somebody else's name in there. Now, if you do want to do business with us, though, also make sure that you're an Alloy CP registered reseller. So again, follow the link on this slide, fill in all the information, make sure you include your resale certificate number, and away you go. And again, we don't look for taking a mortgage out on your house. Nobody's interested in your firstborn child. This is all just gather some information so we know who you are and who we're dealing with. If you've got any questions about that process at all, give us a call here at Alloy CP and we'll take you right through it. So Windows supported platforms. Windows 7 2003, 2003 R2, 2008, 2008 R2, Windows 8, Windows 2011, Windows Server 2012. So lots of choices there. Not many complexities about it all. We have some caveats and some gotchas that we'll talk about later about which of these platforms you might choose to run on given different circumstances. But we'll talk about those when we get there. From the software side, very easy to get. Go to the link on this page, download the free software. It's functionally disabled. I think it allows for 2 concurrent phone calls as it comes, right? But you come to Alloy CP and order your licenses for however many concurrent calls, whatever additional functionality you want. Do you want the call center? Do you want the hotel? You know, whichever of those licenses you want, and then you apply that license key to the freely available downloaded software, and it opens up all of those features for you. Decide which server you're going to run it on. If at all avoidable, do not use a Microsoft Exchange, SharePoint, or SQL server. If you've got anything else available, stay away from those. And not because these are resource hogs, which they can be, but what they don't like doing is when they've got hold of the CPU, they don't like giving it up. And each of those applications will grab hold of a CPU and hold it as long as they can. This obviously doesn't function well in a voice environment. So we're trying to avoid those applications. The next bit of the assignment is to prepare the network. There's a couple of things we'll talk about there in the next couple of slides. On the 3CX website, if you go to 3CX, type in hardware requirements in the search field. One of the first, I think it's in the top 3 or 4 entries, is the hardware requirements document, which you can see on the screen now. I'm not going to go through that, but it's a very clearly laid out document that tells you what sort of CPU, how much memory, hard disk, etc., that you'll need to run the 3CX platform successfully. So it's a handy document and just one of the many resources available at 3cx.com. Again, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of that, but it gives you a good idea of what you need. And again, just a reminder, if I didn't mention it earlier, this presentation, the recording, and a copy of the presentation itself will be available on our website sometime in the next 2 business days. So on the deployment side, when we deploy IP application, we always have a number of TCP, UDP ports that are going to be in use. We need to make sure that A, they're available, and B, in the case of SIP applications, we tend to be going outside of our network, so we need to have some port forwarding and things set up on our firewalls. So these next 2 slides, as I said before, are worth the price of admission. It gives you a list of all the ports that are used by 3CX, what they're used for, and whether or not they're required to be used externally to your network and therefore require port forwarding. So it's a pretty simple document. Down on the left-hand side, it tells us whether it's using TCP, UDP, or both. It gives us the port number, a description of what that port is used for, and then a description of whether port forwarding is required or not, or if it's optional, and when you would need it versus when you wouldn't. Okay, this is a couple of pages of information I keep available with me at all times, anytime I'm dealing with 3CX. As we all know, port numbers and port forwarding is the stuff that will get us into trouble, and get us into trouble every time. It's the hardest part of deploying a system on a customer site, is making sure that the network is set up to handle those ports and everything's in place. So with this document, you're able to sit there and understand if some part of the network is failing for some reason. Gives us an idea where to look, what port numbers, and see if they're available and forwarded properly. So this page, and then this one here. Now what you see here is a whole lot of, on the second page, is we see a whole lot of port numbers and ranges that no port forwarding required, and the reason for that is most of these ports are being used internally for listening and for internal 3CX functions. Now, even though they don't ever go out on the WAN, it's important to make sure those ports aren't in use by other applications in your environment when you go to deploy. So once we've got our software, we've got our licenses and our keys available, we know which Windows server we're going to deploy this on, and we're ready to start the deployment. Now we're down to the installation wizard. So when we first start up the installation wizard, it comes up and tells you with a splash screen that says, hey, we recommend Windows blah blah blah, all the versions that we discussed earlier. Tells you that you need a .NET framework, tells you some of the ports that are going to be required, and gives you some suggestions for RAM and things. And then at that point we move on to the next screen, and then that talks about some of the recommendations for which browsers we can use for our management, talks about phones and gateways that are supported, and talks about, you see it mentions web browsers and things as well. So I say just a couple of splash screens to get us going. We need to accept the licensing terms and agreements, of course, and as always, we recommend that you read those before you move on. There's the default location, but there's nothing to stop you from changing the location where it's going to be installed to. Now, this screen here is one worth taking note of. So which web server is going to be used as the underlying engine for 3CX. There's the Abyss web server, which is a 3CX web server that's supplied, or you can use Microsoft IIS. Now, interestingly enough, one of the traps is Windows 7 only supports a maximum of 10 concurrent HTTP requests on the inbuilt IIS. So if you're using Windows 7, then select the 3CX web server, the Abyss server. The Abyss server is really only rated to up to a maximum of 100 users, concurrent users. If you're deploying more than that, then Windows 7 isn't the appropriate platform for you. Got any questions about that? Again, contact our support guys who are available West Coast business hours and have a chat about it. So once you get past that and made that choice, hit the install. The wizard will start to copy the files. I think we saw a system where this took a bit over 5 minutes, but most of the time it'll be quicker than that. To give it time and let it go. At that point, you hit the finish button and we get into the configuration console that looks like this. So if we start at the top and work our way down, we'll get through this install pretty quickly. So choose a language. We need a local IP address, that's the internal LAN address obviously. We need a public IP address, which is the external IP address on our router facing internet, our VoIP carrier, however that's set up in the customer environment. And from there we move down to settings, and here we have a choice where we can create a new PBX, which is what I'm going to work through now, or we have the option of choosing restore. So if we'd backed up our PBX, backed it up to a secure location, the network the Windows server that we were running on has had a hardware failure and we need to recover our 3CX system quickly, we'd start running the install wizard, the few steps that you've seen here so far, get to the settings option, choose restore existing PBX settings, browse to our backed up file, hit next, load it, restore it, and we're up and running. So as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward recovery process. Extension digits, we need to make a decision here, make it at the start and stick with it. So obviously the number of digits we use is relative to the number of extensions we're expecting to have, and some people will go for high digit counts just because they can. Defaults to 3 though. Mail server. Mail server is pretty important. We need to put in an email address and user and password and decide whether or not it's going to be secure. Usually the answer to that is yes, because this email address is used, and this is the one that's used for alerts and information passed from 3CX about things going on the system. For example, if we hit the maximum number of concurrent calls, an email will be sent to this email address to notify them that your system has exceeded has attempted to exceed its licensing count, and it might be time to upgrade. This email address is also the one that becomes visible when we're sending out auto-install applications for smartphones and things via email. So, as I said, well worth thinking about putting in a generic 3CX support at whatever sort of email address for that, or customer-specific one, etc. Administrator, create the administrator username and password. Make the password complicated, obviously. Make the username complicated if you want. You're not stuck with admin or anything like that on 3CX. And then we get to creating extensions. So creating extensions is as easy as hitting the add button, and then we're into this next screen. So we have an extension number, first name, last name, email address. That email address is used for where this extension's voice messages will be sent to if we send them to email. We have an authentication ID and an authentication password. Just a quick word on password, guys. You cannot make them strong enough, right? The user doesn't have to enter this every single time. The user never has to enter this, but this is the weak point of voice systems being hacked, is those authentication passwords. So do use a mix of alphanumeric and upper and lower case. Do use a lot of characters. 14 is certainly very common nowadays. Again, make it as strong and long as you can. Voicemail PIN, so this is for the user to access their voicemail remotely. And now if we're going to automatically provision a phone for them, we can put in the MAC address, the model. Obviously it needs to be a supported model such as Yealink, and select the interface that it will be configured from, which is that LAN interface. Well, usually it's the LAN interface, and at that time we can auto-configure a phone and the extension is available. And then we'll see the screen showing that information that you see there, the name and the extension number, etc. And we can go in and continue to add additional extensions that way, or in most environments, and certainly medium to large environments, something we're not going to touch on today, but we have the ability to load up an Excel file of do a mass load of extensions. Then we get down to the region settings, so we set in a country code, we set in international dialing code that's going to be used if we're going to allow people to dial and make international calls. We set up an operator extension, and the operator extension is the default destination for incoming calls. Now it defaults to extension 100, as in when we created that first extension, that defaults to extension 100. Also the voicemail extension. So this is the company group voicemail extension, and that defaults to 999, but we can change both of these if we want to. Once we get through that, allowed countries is a really nice feature that a lot of people make a lot of use of. If you click on, it's broken up over North America, South America, Europe, Asia and Middle East, Africa and Australia, and if then you click on the plus sign on any of these boxes, that'll break down into specific regions inside those countries, or countries in South America, Europe, etc. And then you can allow, so by ticking these boxes or ticking the country boxes in the sub-menus below the plus signs, where we apply a tick are the countries that our 3CX server is allowed to call to. If none of them are ticked, then no international calls are allowed. Then we get to the VoIP provider, and again there's a bunch of supported VoIP providers from all over the world that we can go in and pretty much auto-magically select and configure for, or we can go and do additional manual configuration as we go on. And at that point, most of the hard yards are done, and we click Next and Build, and it'll go and build a back-end database that contains all the settings and all the information to make 3CX run. I believe it's actually an SQL database, but I won't bet large amounts of money, but I will bet it's an SQL database at the back end. This then kicks us into a screen for online registration and activation. We want to fill in this screen. We can skip it, right? But this is not. We haven't activated our licenses at this point. Okay, this is really the registration screen that we'd get to even if we weren't going to activate a license. So this is registering the software that we've installed it and we're using it. So we get to the screen even if we're using the demo version of the software. Right? Once the system's up and running, we go into the management console, go to license activation and enter the key there, which enables all the licensing and license levels that we've purchased through Alloy CP for our 3CX system. So this is just a registration screen. And then, congratulations, initial setup completed successfully. Now at that point what we have is 3CX PBX that's set up with whatever licenses we purchased. We've created a number of extensions in there for our users. We have the ability to go out and make external calls via our SIP service provider. Now if we want to add FXS ports, FXO ports, or PRI, ISDN ports into this system, then we're going to need a gateway. And like everything else with 3CX, we have supported gateways and unsupported gateways. At the moment, Alloy CP supports Epigee, and in the very near future we'll have Pattern to add to that list. Go to 3cx.com for a list of the supported gateways. When we use a supported gateway, such as the Pattern, and one of the reasons we're going to take these guys on, we get a couple of benefits which you'll see in the next couple of slides. So, as I say again, out of the box, gateways are totally optional. If you're happy just using a voice over IP service provider, an ITSP or a carrier with trunk services, etc., if you're happy with that sort of deployment, we don't need to worry about the gateways at all. If we're trying to add POTS and FXO, BRI, PRI gateways, then we go through the next step of installing a gateway. So to install a gateway, it's really just go in to the console, say add PSTN gateway, select a model, select a tone set, which is really just a region code, configure the IP address that the gateway is going to have, configure authentication details for each of the ports, and in a case of a supported gateway, we're nearly done, because all we do is hit the button to generate a configuration file that you can see on the bottom right hand side there, and that'll configure a file for us to upload onto the supported gateway, and our job here is done. If we're using an unsupported gateway such as the Epigee, we get to the configure authentication details for each port, save that information, and then go and manually configure the gateway to match those details. So pretty straightforward. So guys, that gives us an idea how simple and quick and easy it is to get a 3CX box up and running. Not much pre-planning required, not much work in terms of actually running through the configuration wizards and everything else to get a basic system up and running. Now, we're going to do future webinars and talk about some of the more detailed capabilities and functions and things that we can do, talk about night bells and call groups and all those sort of bits and pieces. But if you want to get to that before Alloy CP gets to it, go to 3CX Online and they have their video training. 2 links there, one for the basic and one for the advanced. These are very good videos, and if you're going to be an engineer or even a sales engineer and even a salesperson, understanding all the things that 3CX can do, I cannot recommend strongly enough that you have a look at these videos and go through them and take some time to watch them. Most of them are pretty short, to the point, direct, not much waffling, and as I say, you'll walk away with a much stronger understanding and ability to support the product. So all available, all free, and waiting for you there and now. In terms of the next webinars that we're doing, the next 2 are on Yealink. We're going to go through in some detail about the Yealink T4 range, which is their new range of gigabit SIP handsets. So as I said, all fully supported by 3CX. And then the next one is the Yealink RPS, which is the redirection provisioning service that Yealink offer now, which is it's being used by a lot of organisations now, particularly in the service provider space. we've had a lot of questions about it. There's been a few myths and things out there in the market about it, so we thought we'd take you through in half an hour or so what it is capable of doing and how it works and some of the intricacies under the covers. So if you're interested in either of those, hop along to alloycp.com/webinars and register for them. The registration's up and available today. And now I'm going to move over to questions and answers. So let me just have a look what questions came up while we were talking, or while I was talking. And the only one outstanding at the moment is 3CX limited to 3-digit extensions? And that's absolutely not. You can choose between 2, 3, 4 and 5-digit extensions. So guys, as I said, I've opened up the floor to any questions. If there's anybody there who's got a question, please raise your hand and we'll try and deal with it. Okay, Alfredo, I'll open up your mic now and ask away.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have the